the City of Forest Park Council Public Hearing, May 21st, 2018. First item on the agenda is to consider a development plan for medical marijuana dispensary at 124-145 Omniplex Court in the PB Planned Business District. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Chris Anderson. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Forest Park. This item is on your agenda tonight because the applicants are seeking to construct what's known as a medical marijuana dispensary, but in terms of use is quite close to a retail establishment on a section of property that is currently part of the 1217071 Omniplex Court property. What we know is the former Kmart. It's being developed into the Omni Funplex. They have a contract to purchase and what is essentially an outlot on that property that would be at the corner of Omniplex Court and Omniplex Drive, the southwest corner. The Planning Commission reviewed both this item and a special exception. And the special exception is within the authority of the Planning Commission to grant or deny or approve with conditions. The development plan, by contrast, goes to the City Council for approval. And that's because it's established as part of the zoning map, and all map amendments go to Council. So in terms of procedure, following this public hearing, we'll submit an ordinance that would be on your agenda for the regular readings and vote that would implement this development plan, and at that point it would become part of the zoning map. I can tell you that the special exception was approved, and that was following actually two meetings in which the Planning Commission first sent the applicants back for additional work on the building to bring it to a little bit higher standard. The other thing that the Planning Commission did in reviewing the special exception is review many of the sort of operational considerations that surround this use. It's new to the state of Ohio, new to us, and so certainly there were a lot of questions and things to discuss. And I'm sure the applicants would be probably happy to answer any questions. But I'll just let you know that the Planning Commission did find those parameters of operation, many of which are regulated by the state, to be acceptable, and they did approve the plan or approve the special exception for the development plan that consists of. This one's a little unusual in terms of development plans because it's really just a one property plan. Oftentimes we'll have something in phases, and so we'll have some future considerations to discuss, but basically the development plan is what they're planning to build. It's the same thing as we would have as a site plan in the Planning Commission. So it consists of the building, the parking lot. Currently the site is paved as part of the old Kmart parking lot. There'll be some reconfiguration of that site, but essentially there are driveways that remain in the same place. The site is well landscaped, and the building architecture, they did take into consideration. Not all of the Planning Commission comments were, if you did all of them, you would have a roof that was partly flat and partly pitched. There were some things that weren't. Some Planning Commissioners had a preference one way or another, but I think the overall result was one that the Planning Commission did find was responsive to their comments, and so they recommended approval of this, subject to the applicant obtaining a license from the state, which they have not been granted yet, and that the HVAC equipment be screened and the waste disposal also be screened in a manner that's consistent with the zoning code. And they referred those items back to the staff or me to review at the time that they would apply for permits. With that, I have, the vote was 6-0 and in favor of recommending approval. And that would conclude my presentation. I'm here to answer questions, but there may be other people, so.
Okay, at this time, we would start with questions or comments from council, but I would caution council to keep one thing in mind, and I will do it in the next public hearing as well. This public hearing is limited to the development plan. We're not talking about things outside or beyond the development plan. Comments or questions?
Comment, question. Just a procedural question. I know the Planning Commission always approves these building plans. Do they always come to us? I don't recall them always coming to us.
We don't.
No, and I sort of made reference to that, but it could have easily been glossed over. Oftentimes, a development plan will have two stages: a preliminary development plan, which gives a general sense of the layout and the uses, and then one or more final development plans. Those final plans, or any revisions to those just go through the Planning Commission, as long as it's a minor revision, and that's it. That decision is the effective one. This particular use was not part of any prior development plan for the Omniplex development. The area where it's paved was actually added to the Kmart parking because Kmart deeded some of their own parking over to Home Depot when Home Depot was developed. All of this happened between 15 and 20 years ago. Given that, and that the use was brand new for us and for the state of Ohio, a new development plan was really the only right way to do that.
Any other questions or comments related to the development plan? Mr. Brown?
Chris, you mentioned there was a provision in the acceptance related to the applicant becoming licensed by the state.
Right, that application's been submitted, and this goes back a ways into November, but at that time, they had made application for the special exception, and we hadn't reviewed it yet, but that was far enough along in the zoning process for them to submit, and they also had to have a contract on the property to submit their application, which I think had a lot of other materials and things in it, to the state. The state has not granted any licenses yet.
So in understanding this is a public hearing, procedurally, we would not make a decision on this until that license was granted, yes or no? Considering the provision.
Right. The reason for the provision is if for some reason the license was not granted, I would suppose that the applicants wouldn't build on the site, right? But the very fact of an approval being there and somebody else coming in back in the future, it's a very minor consideration, and it's just an acknowledgement that those licenses had not been granted yet. If they had, then we wouldn't need it.
Any other questions or comments regarding the development plan? Hearing none, thank you. We have about 3.5 minutes before we go to the next public hearing. I would declare, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the development plan? Anyone from the public would like to comment, question, or comment on the development plan?
Members of council, my name is Greg May, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant on this medical marijuana dispensary. First of all, thank you for your time tonight. I just wanted to let you know, and specifically to your question, that this morning, the Board of Pharmacy announced that they will be announcing the results of the dispensary application process on Wednesday morning, this Wednesday. So while we can't have an ultimate decision here tonight, I understand that. I think by the time of the next opportunity, we will know if we're going to have a license. And I feel very hopeful and confident that we will get one here. So I hope that I get to come back and find out if you'll approve it.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Hearing none. I would, quickly,
There won't be any decision by us tonight.
no.
So,
This is a hearing.
I mean, this will come after the state's decision. We'll probably do it at our next council meeting, maybe, I don't know.
Depending on when the ordinance is presented. Anything else from the public? Hearing none. This public hearing is now closed. And if my
45 public hearing for the 1215 West Kemper Road
Thank you, sir.
planned office to R2, one family residence. Mr. Anderson?
I am. That's what I was trying to do.
Hi, Chris Anderson, Community Development Director again. This public hearing is for an application to rezone just over 1 acre of property located adjacent to this property at 1215 West Kemper Road. The school district's central office building sits on this property. The parcel is actually one of 3 that make up the overall high school property. There's a large 32-acre parcel that almost all of the buildings are on, and then there's another 1-acre parcel at the northwest corner of the property, separate parcel. And that's the one that has there's a grove of trees and a school sign and a historical marker for the Newell School, which once was on this property prior to Forest Park being here. This request is due to the school's construction project, and one of those aspects of it is that they are going to be demolishing the central office building. The footprint of the new high school building at least touches part of that, and the plan is to relocate those offices to 825 Waycross, which is the current intermediate school. The state also requires that the project be on one parcel of land, which means that the school is going to be preparing what's known as a consolidation plat to take those 3 parcels and combine them into one. They really need to rezone the property so that the property all has one zoning district. Currently, the majority of it is R2. That's also true, same district as this property, as this building sits on. To give you a little history, the school district applied to have that rezoned from R2 to planned office, sort of the reverse of what we're being asked to do right now, in 1993. And according to the documents in the file, it looks as if they were at least exploring or maybe even had some negotiations on selling the central office building and moving their district offices, but selling the central office building to another user, possibly for medical office or other kind of business office, and that would not have worked in the R2 district. The school district offices our municipal offices do, but a business office is not a permitted use. And then on the flip side of that, in the R2 district, you have the high school, which is a permitted use. If it had been all office zoning there, the high school would not have been a permitted use. So Forest Park's pretty particular about what we have in each district, and so it made sense, given at least the plans of the school at the time, and I think probably the city's desire to support those plans, to rezone that small 1.163 acre parcel from R2 to planned office, and that happened in 1993. Approximately 25 years later, here we are, and the request is to just do the opposite. So it's really that simple. That was a lot of background, but it's pretty simple. It will do a couple things that are in my mind, good zoning practice, and one of those is to have, again, that larger property under common ownership to be in a single zoning district. And then it also eliminates what we sometimes call a spot zone. And a spot zone is a little troubling sometimes in terms of how our regulations treat very similar properties. So if you have one property that has one kind of zoning and all the surrounding property has another kind of zoning, then one of those is going to have more restrictions, one of them is probably going to have more privileges, and so you kind of don't want to do either to a single property versus similar neighbors. So if the zoning were to go through, the rezoning, it would mean that the whole area between Winton Road on the east, Waycross on the south, Mill Road on the west, and Kemper Road on the north, that very large block of the city of Forest Park would all be R2. And that's what our master plan shows. And so all of this is in order and good zoning practice, and I recommend it. The Planning Commission also agreed with that and voted 6-0 at their April 13th meeting to recommend approval of the rezoning application. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments, Councilwoman Irby?
You said in passing that the requirement of the state is that all the parcels, that it be on all one parcel. Does, and you said that the only exception is that that piece is business. So that would make that other piece that has the grove and the sign R2.
It is right now, yes.
Okay. Does this affect that becoming a part of the whole parcel? And does that put that piece in jeopardy of going away and making that historic marker unprotected?
I think the rezoning to some extent will facilitate the consolidation plat. I think the consolidation plat is something that's going to happen no matter what. As for that parcel being protected, it is part of the plans that we have seen. I mean, they are conscious of protecting that area and not building on it. They have in their preliminary grading plans plans to keep any earth movement away from the tree grove so that will survive. We have to be careful of things like water runoff that doesn't affect those trees. It's going to stress those trees, really. This is a really large construction project going on, and I wouldn't be surprised if we lose a couple of trees there just because of that kind of disruption. But they do plan to incorporate the protection of that area into their plan for the new campus, and that also includes keeping the historical marker. But in terms of it being on its own parcel, I don't think that that's any requirement of having a historic marker, or you would still identify that as the site, okay, even if the parcel was consolidated with a larger one.
Any other comments? Questions? Anyone from the public have any? Mr. Burns?
So just to a couple of questions, because the current school's in R2. I'm assuming that's one parcel.
Two, but,
The current school is on, well, I mean, the building.
oh, the building, yeah, one parcel,
It's
yes.
on one parcel. What we're talking about is basically consolidating several parcels that is currently just green space and the administration building into another parcel. Considering the work that's being done, would the current building address and the new consolidated parcel need to also be consolidated? Because there's some Phase 2 work that seems to be a part of it, and I don't know if that's a consideration that needs to be a part of this discussion or a later discussion, but
Well, addresses are assigned by the city of Forest Park. They're not assigned, some people think they're assigned by the post office, and that's not the case. They're assigned by the city of Forest Park and specifically by my department. There can be more than one address on a parcel.
let me make sure I'm clear.
Okay.
The address is not my concern.
Oh, okay, all right.
The parcel of the current building and the net new consolidated parcel, considering that the current building is going to be demolished and incorporated into the new facade or landscape in the current project, will both parcels, old and new, need to be consolidated?
Yes, if I understand your question correctly. What will happen is you're going to have you have a 32-acre parcel, you have about a 1.5-acre parcel, and another 1-acre parcel. All of them, I'm going to round it up to 35 acres. If you total those three together, that new parcel will encompass that 35 acres. It might carry the same number as the prior one. It doesn't have to, but it might, because that helps with maintaining the historical record. And what it'll show is that at some point in 2018, whenever that gets filed with the county, that two parcels were consolidated into it, the size of that parcel increased through the consolidation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I didn't hear about the parcel that the current building is on, the current high school building, not the administration building.
Okay, it's zoned R2.
So does that need to be consolidated into the net new
Yes.
parcel?
Yeah, well, yes,
Making one total parcel for the entire campus?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay, anybody from the audience have any questions, comments?
Okay.
Hearing none. Mr. Denny, anything from you? Okay, hearing none. Public hearing is closed.